This is Jim Blackburn, and I am really sorry that I cannot be with you this week in Moore County. I had hoped to be there live and in person to talk about learning to be happy and beating the pressure of perfection, which this is a title. And due to my own scheduling conflicts, not anyone else's, that is not possible. So I have sought to put together this brief program that would be somewhat the same as if I were there live and in person. It is titled Learning to be Happy and Beating the Pressure of Perfection. It's an hour's worth of, a little bit more than that, of ethics credit with the State Bar, and it really is also, I suppose, a study of some steps that I think that you could follow that if you did would make you not only happier, they would make you more profitable, they would make you better with your clients, and you would enjoy so much more being in the legal field, whether you are a paralegal or just not a paralegal, maybe an attorney or a staff person. Also, I think there is a problem with everyone trying to be perfect, not admitting mistakes, not saying we've done something wrong, that if we follow to an extreme gets us into trouble, or at least it got me into trouble. And finally, I want to explore with you in this hour how to make the most of now. I have forwarded a manuscript that I hope you will have the opportunity to see. If you don't get the manuscript, if you would let me know, I will be happy to send one to you. My email address is jim@blackburnseminars.com. That's jim@blackburnseminars.com. And if you don't get the manuscript, I'll be happy to send one to you by way of email. All of that being said, I used to tell people all the time in the years that I've been doing these seminars that I felt like passion was perhaps one of the most important character traits that anyone in the legal field could have. And I still do believe that. And yet, I used to say to people that if you had some passion just once in your life or once in your career on a certain case or something like that, it would make you better at what you do than you otherwise might be. And I still believe that. However, I've begun to think in the last year or so differently about passion. It came to me when I read an editorial column by David Brooks, who writes for the New York Times. And I saw it in an online edition, I think in the fall of 2015. He was in New York and was attending a ceremony one evening where Lady Gaga was receiving an award for her life's work. And so he asked if he could interview her. He was sitting at her table and she said yes, and so he did. And he writes this column about Lady Gaga and a life of passion. And, you know, he asked her what it was she wanted to be when she grew up. And rather than say she wanted to be an actress or a singer or a performer, she said rather she wanted to be the face of someone who was very brave and who exhibited a great deal of passion. And I think you might have to agree that she has certainly done that with the type of acting and performing that she does, the singing of the national anthem at the Super Bowl last year, and the singing of a medley of the music from The Sound of Music at the Academy Awards a couple of years ago with Julie Andrews standing alongside in the wings watching her, and she did so well. And so David Brooks then goes on and really spends the majority of his column on passion. What is passion? And is it something that you get just narrowly for a specific case or a particular client or particular matter, or is it a way that you live your life? And he mentioned that He thought that people who were passionate sometimes had a sense of insecurity, and they were trying to get over the insecurity. And they had also learned to get on what he called the other side of fear. That is to say, that they were no longer afraid, were really willing to put themselves out there, not knowing how, they are going to be received, how they're going to be accepted. Lawyers do this all the time when they make arguments in front of judges or try cases in front of juries or even talk to new clients. Paralegals do this the same way when you interview people. You don't know how the advice that you give, the counsel that you give is going to be received. And yet you have to be passionate enough to give the best advice and the best counsel in many ways, regardless of how it is going to be received. Just like me doing this tape today, I don't know how you're going to like it, but I'm going to do, the best that I can. And he concludes his story, or his column on passion, by asking this question: what would you do if you were not afraid of failing? What would you do if you were not afraid of failing? I think it's a great question. Several years ago, Sheryl Sandberg, who is the chief operating officer for Facebook, was on vacation with her husband and family. When her husband died rather quickly when he fell off of a treadmill at the hotel. He had had some heart problems, and he fell and didn't catch or brace himself and fell and hit his head and died, I think, almost instantly. And she wrote a piece on grief for Facebook, in which she said that she used to believe that what people wanted most in the world was hope. And while she still believes that's important, she thinks really that what they want most is empathy. And so, in the legal profession, you have a great opportunity to show empathy towards clients or witnesses or most anybody. She wanted to say that she used to ask people all the time, how are they doing? How was their day? And she doesn't like that anymore, or she didn't then, because her day wasn't very good because her husband had died. And yet, years later, after the shock of his death has subsided just a bit, she realizes now how fortunate she is and grateful for the children that she has. And that at least when he died, he hurt no one but himself when he had his heart problems. He wasn't driving a car, for example, with his kids in the car. And so no matter how difficult you may have it today, always remember that somebody, somewhere, has it more difficult than you do, or that I do. Towards the end of the article on grief that she wrote, she said that she had wanted to go to a PTA meeting to take her husband with him, and he could not go, and so a friend of hers said, well, Sheryl, Dave, her husband, can't go. He is no longer available. What you need to do is come up with a plan B and kick the you-know-what out of plan B. Something like this, a paralegal from Charlotte once told me a couple of years ago, that if plan A or even plan B does not work out, always remember that there are many more letters left in the alphabet. I like that. That's optimistic. That's looking forward. A number of years ago, when Gracie Allen of the show and the husband and wife combination of Burns and Allen, she died young in life, and she left a note in her study in an envelope written to George Burns. And in the note it was written, George, do not put a period where God has only placed a comma. Do not put a period where God has only placed a comma. And I think, looking back on my career, too often times we tend to allow clients to believe that when they've gotten into difficulty, whether it's through civil matters such as domestic matters or bankruptcy or even being sued, a period has come into their life and changed it forever, when in fact their life is not over, and it's really a comma being placed there rather than a period. And so I think that's important to consider that. Don't let your clients put a period where God has only placed a comma. In the years that I've been doing these seminars, and in the years when I really had to essentially rebuild my own life from the disasters that I caused to myself years ago, I started trying to do things differently. I went for long walks initially, trying to figure out what I would do with the rest of my life. And I want to say at the outset, one of the things that was the greatest gift to me these years is the gift of time. The gift of time, that I was given a certain amount of time, however long, to be able to redirect myself. Just as you right now are given the gift of time today, and hopefully days to come, when if you haven't been doing things the way you wish that you had done them in the past, you can do so now. You can go forward now. You can change the way you were even yesterday or last week and do it differently today. That's possible. And so I've made a list of thoughts and ideas and concepts that I think if people follow those, these things would happen. You would make your life happier. You would make your law practice happier. And you might make more money if you're a lawyer. You certainly wouldn't have trouble with the state bar. And you wouldn't worry so much about being perfect. You would just be worried and trying to do the best you can. Rudyard Kipling has this great poem, If, that was written in the 19th century. And towards the end of the poem, he ends with these words: if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, you'll be a man, my son. Filling the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds of distance run. I don't know of any advice, any counsel that is any better than that. And if you follow that precept, you're going to be happier. You're going to make the most of today or the most of now. And you won't worry so darn much about being perfect. So I came up with a list. And it's not the Ten Commandments or anything like that, but it's an interesting list. You can come up with your own list. These simply are mine. And they are the concepts and thoughts that I've written together. They're in no particular order, but I want to briefly go over them with you in the few minutes that we have here to talk today. There are ways you can make you better at what you do. And so I know that people come to CLE programs because they want to get the necessary hours approved, by the state bar. I understand that. I totally get that. But wouldn't it be interesting, wouldn't it be unique, if during the space of this time, for this particular program, it was actually helpful? It was actually beneficial. It may not be beneficial to all of you, and I wish that were so, but that's probably not going to happen. Some of you may disagree with the thoughts that I say, and some of you may say, well, that's just a way of living your life, and that doesn't have anything to do with the practice of law. Nevertheless, I think you can take these ideas, these concepts, and I think that you can use them to, get into carrying these out. You won't do them all the time perfectly. That won't happen. But if you could do some of them some of the time, I think it'll make a heck of a difference. The first rule, or the first thought that I have, is the thought of showing up and being on time. I was a client as well as a lawyer. I used to wait in lawyers' receptions rooms waiting to see the attorneys. And I was always anxious, I was always nervous, and I was always happy when they would see me quickly, and I did not have to wait thumbing through magazines, sometimes weeks and months old, before they saw me. I enjoyed seeing them right away. It gave me a sense that I was being treated with some respect, that what I was there to see them about was important and was not made to wait. I think if you can show up and be on time, not only with your clients, but to the courthouse, with your clients there, to meetings, to depositions, to everything, you're going to get a great deal of respect from people. A couple of examples. Years ago, when, I think it was in the 1990s, when I waited tables at 42nd Street Oyster Bar in Raleigh. We started the dinner shift at 5 o'clock. And always some waitstaff people walked in at 5 o'clock or a few minutes after, because that's when the shift started. They could clock in. The smartest ones, the best ones, the ones who were really thinking ahead, were there maybe 30 minutes early, let's say 4:30 or 20 minutes to 5, because there was always side work, preparatory work to do. And you were assigned, based on where your section was that night, a certain type of side work. And so I realized early on that if I got there early, because I was sort of slow, if I got there early and started doing the very best that I could, then what would happen is I would be ready at 5 o'clock if someone came to the restaurant to have dinner, and I could get a table set. And then oftentimes someone who was late was always already set as well. And they would come up to me and say, "Jim, can you take this table, get them some drinks and some hush puppies, and I'll take it over in a few minutes. I've got to finish my side work." I said, "Sure." And I would do that. I'd greet the table, take them their drink order and so forth. And invariably the person who was supposed to wait on them would come back to me and say, "Listen, I am in the weeds, I'm behind, I'm stressed. Can you just take the table? You can keep the tips. If you'll just take it, that would save me so much." I said, "Sure." They said, "Thank you so much." And they're very grateful to me for doing that. What they didn't dawn on them, or it didn't bother them or something, was they had lost the opportunity to make maybe $10 from that table as a tip. And if your goal is to make, at that time it was my goal, to make $100 a night in tips, and I can make an extra $10 from a table, that's an additional 10% of my earnings solely given to me because I had showed up and I'd been on time. Now, if you're a lawyer, you know that if you go to federal court in North Carolina, you had best be there early, or by golly, not 10 seconds late, because they start right then. From my experience, state court is a little bit more liberal than that on time. Nevertheless, regardless, those people who are there on time and show up, I think, are going to impress their clients, the courts, and everyone else far more than the other people will. So that's the first rule. A second thing that I don't know how many lawyers there are in Moore County, but you probably practice in other counties as well. And so you know some of the people with whom you deal, and you have cases with them. And perhaps some of those cases have been hotly contested, or you have disagreements with another law firm or the other side. The smartest thing you can do is not to hold grudges against these people. Do not go there. President Clinton once said that in order to be a successful president of the United States, you first had to have no memory. And what, of course, he meant by that is you couldn't look in the past and hold grudges. You had to go forward. You couldn't worry about how someone treated you yesterday. You can remember, but you can't hold it against them. You've got to go forward. I only got better in my own life when my life crashed if I made a conscious effort to blame nobody but myself. Nobody but myself. When I first wrote my little book, Flame Out, many years ago in a manuscript, I gave it to Rick Gammon, Wade Smith, and Gene Spaulding, my psychiatrist, and to a person. They all thought it was terrible. And so, what the heck? That didn't work for me. So finally, several years later, I found a good friend. She's a lawyer in your county, Mary Mac Pope. And we met. She helped me through many months and encouraged me to write a book that was upbeat, that was optimistic, that did not seek to blame anybody for anything except, of course, myself. There's a practical reason, if you make a mistake, to blame nobody but yourself. Because if you blame others even 5 or 10% and you take 90%, people are going to remember that 5 or 10%. The only way it's going to work for you is if you suck it up and blame nobody but yourself. I promise you that's the way. So when I did that in my book, it did very well and went through 4 printings, not like John Grisham's 4 printings, but 4 of my own, which is not bad. But it was successful. And I'm so grateful that I met Mary Mac and that she helped me do that and encouraged me to do that. Try to encourage people to not blame other people, whether it's when they come to see you, whether it's whatever kind of case it is. If they're responsible, you know, the best thing in the world is to say, I did this. You need to own your own mistakes. I was in Wilkesboro recently, and there is a lawyer there who used to be a member of the State Bar Council. And years ago, he came to the Oyster Bar when I was waiting tables with his son. And it turned out that I got a couple of bills mixed up and gave his bill, which was only for 2 people, to a table that had 4 people, which meant that their bill that they were given to pay was less. They quickly paid it and left the Oyster Bar. And when I discovered this, I went back to this person, my friend from Wilkesboro, and told him what had happened and assured him that he could pay less money to me and I would suck it up and basically pay the balance out of my own tip so the Oyster Bar wouldn't lose any money. I would be the one who would lose money. And he looked at me and he smiled and said, "No, Jim, I don't want to do that. I want to pay the whole bill. You give me the bill and I will pay it." And then he did, and then he left me a tip on the whole bill. And later his son went to the restroom before they left the building, and I asked him, "Why did you do that?" He said, "Jim, I needed to make an impression on my son." This was a very good teachable moment. And the moment was, if you make a mistake and you say so, perhaps, good things will happen. And I share that story with you because even though it happened, gosh, maybe 20 years ago, I still remember almost word for word. I even remember where they were sitting. It made such an impression on me. And that's the best illustration that I can give to you here in this particular conversation as to, oh, I don't know, how you should handle your own mistakes. Take them totally. It's a practical and moral right thing to do. If I had done that sooner in my own life, back when I was still practicing law, how much better life would have been for me. How much better it would have been for everyone if I had simply had the nerve and the courage to do that. But I did not. I eventually found my voice, but it took me a long while to do that. Don't you do that. Don't you wait to find your own voice. Do it now. I think, for me, One of the most difficult things I have ever had to do was to quit living in the past. For years, I have lived in the past, worrying, not all the time, but thinking about what life would have been like for me if I had not gotten into trouble. What life would have been like for me if I could have just put the past behind me. I know that I can't change it. I know that. But I've had a hard time doing that. I still do that way too much. Maybe you do too. Maybe you have made some mistakes that you regret, either in your legal field or in your own personal life. My thought concept is how I get past that the most is to now do the best I can every day. And I make